It's week 5 of the NFL season, and Ryan Belongia and I are here talking DFS. We have a game of the year, and it happens to be on the main slate, so we're looking forward to that. We'll be talking about Bills, Chiefs, and every other Sunday game coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Hopefully your week was good getting here. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by No House Advantage. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. If you could please rate and review the podcast, it helps out a lot. Also, if you enjoy listening to us, hopefully winning some money off us, that would be a good thing too. Ryan, we're at week 6. I think I said week 5 in the intro, which is a really good way to start the program, but. Hopefully nobody listens to that. Week 6, it's really flying along here. How's everything with you?
Yeah, season's flying by. Everything with me is good. I went to another game in London last weekend. Saw my Packers in London. It was cool until the end.
Hopefully you left at halftime.
Yeah, no, I didn't. It was cool until we blew the 17-point lead. DFS wise, it was frustrating, but I broke about even. Frustrating because I ended up going with Damien Harris in a lot of my most important lineups, and he went down injured right away. A couple weeks.
It's funny. You said if one of those guys gets hurt, the other guy is just a huge monster. And I was hoping that you had gotten lucky and clicked the one that didn't get hurt.
Yeah, so I did play a New England running back on every lineup I made. I just had decided to put Damien Harris in my more expensive stuff and Ramondre in my cheaper stuff. Just happens like that sometimes. NFL DFS can be brutal. A couple weeks ago, I had David Montgomery as my highest owned player, and he got injured in the first quarter. And, you're just dead right away. You think about these lineups for hours, maybe days, maybe, and then, you're just dead right away. I mean, maybe if you run so hot, you might be able to cash. But fortunately, I did well in cash games, so I still broke even. But, yeah, frustrating.
It's funny because we're always like, play DFS. You don't have to worry about injuries. And then two guys get hurt in the first quarter. You're like, oh, I guess we still have to wait about injuries. Yeah, you hope that it doesn't affect you as much. You don't have David Montgomery the next week, but it can definitely.
Yeah, and other times maybe you fade David Montgomery. Maybe you don't play him at all, and he's owned on 30% of the lineups, and then that's huge for you, and you win a lot of money. Sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it doesn't.
It does, yeah. No, last week was weird too because you mentioned Ramondre, but like. All the cheap running backs went crazy. So, I mean, I had Ramondre and Jeff Wilson. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm ahead of the game here. And then all of a sudden, Breece Hall went off, a couple of other guys, and was like, oh, well, I guess it doesn't really matter because Alvin Kamara went off, and he was Fournette went off. Like, everybody under 7,000, everybody played. They all did really well. So, it's kind of irrelevant at that point, as long as you played two of those guys. But it was weird that we talked last week about, you don't only need your guys to do well. You need other guys not to do well. And that was a week where it's like everybody else did well too. So like the running or the receivers and quarterback kind of separated everybody. It was funny too because the chalk defense went crazy too. We talked about Dallas as the chalk defense last week. They were like 30% in some of my single entry contests, and they had 23 points. So it was like irrelevant running back. Everybody had good players. So it was one of those weeks where kind of everybody got there on the chalk ones. It was kind of how you did elsewhere. But let's jump into week 6. I mentioned at the intro, as I said, what wrong week it was. But we have game of the year this week, and somehow Bills Chiefs is not a Monday or Sunday night game. It's we were talking before. I'm sure CBS must have bid the crap out of this one and had their first pick. I'm sure that CBS and Fox get some top picks so they don't, all the good games don't go to prime time. But still, it's fun to see that marquee game, not as a prime game, as the Sunday afternoon game. But it's more than anything for DFS. It's fun to have it on our slate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad it's on the slate, and me being in London, glad it's in the afternoon, so I get to watch it. I have trouble watching those primetime games when they start at 1:30.
That's a good point too. So you got like a 9:30 start or something for you?
9:30 start. Yeah. Which will be nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we have 11 games this week. We have 8 early and 3 late on the slate. We do have the first set of bye weeks this week. We got the Lions, the Titans, the Raiders, and the Texans. The Raiders definitely need a bye. They have those 4 teams are off this week. Primetime games. We had the thrilling Washington-Chicago game last night. One of the few primetime games I have not turned on. I did not even watch that game. I was busy and I looked up and it was halftime. It was 3-0. I'm like, yeah, forget it. Apparently, Justin Fields did not look good. We got Dallas Philly, a great game on Sunday night. It's a 5-0 versus 4-1. That'll be a lot of fun. That'll be a good sit down and watch game after the game of the year. And then we have Chargers in Denver on Monday night. I don't know how we keep getting Denver in prime time, but here we are.
Yeah, so we got these two games that really stand out. I mean, you mentioned this is the game of the year, right? Buffalo, KC. It's got I checked yesterday. I saw 54 total. I didn't see today. But yeah, that's the highest we've seen in a while. And these two teams, people will remember that playoff game just last season. I think they combined for 78 points, and one of the best games you'll ever see.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a pretty popular spot. And then we do have one other spot over 50, the Seahawks and Cardinals, which actually looks like a pretty good spot for both teams. But
it does.
Other than that, Scott, I don't see much. And I'm looking for I'm looking for something else. So hopefully we can find it, because these two games are going to be so popular. But I just don't see how you can really avoid them. It just seems like a couple of players from one or two of those spots, it looks like they're going to be on the winning lineup.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of picking the right quarterback receiver combo of these two games. Then you play that, but you got to also intersperse some guys from other games. I think that's what we're here to find out. I do have some plays in their games I do like, but and I don't think anybody's getting away from. And the funny thing is, those two games are both in the afternoon too. So everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, Bills Chiefs." DFS players gonna be like, "Well, let's put Arizona Seattle on the other TV because that's a 50.5." So I think it's funny how we have game of the year, but I think a lot of fantasy players and DFS players are gonna want two screens that time, because we have I didn't know if we thought Arizona Seattle would be quite this high flying, but it certainly looks like it. Seattle is scoring a lot of points, giving up a lot of points, and in DFS, that's what you want right there.
Yeah, no, it definitely wouldn't have. Seattle keeps being one of the more popular targets on all these slates, and you never would have thought that coming into the season with Geno Smith, and they usually play slow. And what's happened is Geno Smith played well, and they're also playing fast. One of the faster teams in football recently. Both those teams actually, they no huddle at some of the highest rates in the NFL. Their games combined for some of the highest amount of plays. So yeah, and then the Seattle side is just so cheap. So
yeah,
why have a game like that?
Why does Draftkings not raise Tyler Lockett at some point?
It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
5,600 again. He was 5,600 last week. It's even cheaper than he was a few weeks ago. And this spot's arguably better. And it's not like he's been putting up duds in these spots. He's been having good games. So you think he would be 6,500.
Yeah, he would hit 2 touchdowns last week. It's just it's pretty wild that he has not moved. A little bit of disrespect there for Tyler Lockett. We do have some low total games here. We've got 4 games that are under 44. We have New England, Cleveland at 43, Jacksonville, Indy at 42. The first teams to play the second time this year. They're playing again. Cincy, New Orleans is 43. Carolina and the Rams is 41.5. So we do have some low total games, especially that LA Carolina game is wild too, because it's a big spread too. So Carolina is a super low implied total.
Yeah, there might be some spots we can go in a couple of those games, but as far as full stacks, I don't know. The other one I was looking at, I don't know if you were looking at a game to stack besides one of the two good ones, but
of course,
I was thinking maybe Baltimore. I mean, just because we can. So Bateman's out, and I see we got a question in the chat about Bateman actually just now that I'll let you get to, but I think Bateman's going to be out again. And so it just makes the Baltimore stack pretty easy. Mark Andrews has been so good. He actually projects better than Kelsey this week. And you can pair it with Duvernay as well. So I could see stacking Baltimore if you want to try to get away from Allen or Mahomes or Kyler but I don't know. What about you? Is there any other of these spots you're looking at?
Yeah, Rick Herrera had that question in the chat. I like Alec Pierce, but I would drop him for Rashad Bateman. I think that we saw enough from Bateman those first couple of games. It seems like the injuries maybe this week, and then maybe he's back, but I think I would have to take the upside of Bateman. We're still, 6 weeks into the season. Bateman was someone that was like a 6th, 7th round pick. Alec Pierce was a 17th round pick. Pierce has come on the last 2 weeks, but I think I'd rather have Bateman for the rest of the year.
Right. Do you want Lamar Jackson's number 1 wide receiver, or do you want Matt Ryan's number 2?
You kind of answered the question right there.
Yeah.
I would pick up Bateman. I would not drop Garrett Wilson. That was the other option there. I've seen enough from Wilson. I know the Zach Wilson experiment's a little we're not totally sure about that yet. Wilson was really good with Flacco, but I still keep Garrett Wilson. As for your stacks, we will get that. We talked to quarterbacks. I'm considering Tampa Bay with Brady and Evans. I'm also considering Minnesota with Cousins and Jefferson as some mini stacks if I want to get a lineup that's different from those top teams. I'd still play some guys from Seattle and Arizona and the Chiefs of Buffalo. But if I want to get a little different quarterback, those are two options that we're going to talk about here in a second, but that I do like. But yeah, there's a lot of games in the middle here. But these two top games, like it's clear that they stand out pretty well compared to most of the slates we've been on. We've already had one or two games in the low 50s, but 54 is a big number. And that's not only like a big number, you've got just superstar power. Like every once in a while you get a game like, I think we had Seattle and Detroit or something. I forget who it was, but it was like a high total. We're like, all right, well, we got some names here, but like you're talking Allen and Diggs and Mahomes and Kelsey. Like these are super high power games. The game is the game that everybody's going to watch too. Like you don't want to watch that game in the afternoon and be like, oh, I only have one player in this game. So it's that lingers into, obviously you're playing tournaments where you're playing a bunch of lineups. You're going to want to go somewhere different. I mean, this game could be 24-21. It could be something like that rather than 38-35. So it's possible that they play a little defense. I don't really see that happening, especially with the Chiefs defense. The secondary is struggling right now. Devontae Adams lit him up last week, and they've been giving up some big plays. But it sure will be a lot of fun. Who do you think wins that game?
I think Buffalo. What about you?
Road favorites. The first time in Patrick Mahomes' career he's been a home underdog, which is pretty wild considering he was a rookie at one point, but they were still pretty decent. I think Buffalo's a better team. I think Buffalo finds a way to win also. I think it's going to be fun, but I think that they're going to get a little bit of redemption here, although I don't think the redemption really counts until they do it in a playoff game. They beat Kansas City last year too. I remember it was my wife was having a party here and we were watching that game, and it was I remember the Bills beating the Chiefs in the regular season last year. But
yep.
I'll go Bills. I'll go Bills by a touchdown.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's hard not to think this Bills team's the best in the league. I think
both offenses are so good, but I think the Bills defense is definitely a step up from Casey's defense.
Right, and like Kansas City, I don't know, they've kind of been. I don't know. I don't want to write Kansas City off, but they needed quite the comeback to beat the Raiders. I think the Bills probably should have won that playoff game. Maybe they'll want a little bit of revenge. I don't know. It just seems like a spot where Buffalo is going to win. That's like you said. It's kind of meaningless. So like, it's not even that, if KC loses, it's not the end of the world, obviously.
Yeah. It's funny you say that the Bills should have won. They had the lead with 13 seconds left, and they definitely should have won that game. They blew that so badly. But I mean, yeah, it was who had the ball last in that game. But let's get into the slate. There's a lot of games to talk about. First, a note from our sponsors at Play with Swagger. There are 50 million fantasy sports players and sports bettors in the U.S., but 90% of them of all cash prizes are won by only 2% of the players. That's because most sports gaming options were created for the pros. The dudes dropping loads of cash on data to find an edge over the rest of us. Not Swagger. Swagger is a daily fantasy sports site created for sports fans who simply want some skin in the game and a real shot at winning. Are you tired of losing because of one bad pick? With Swagger, you don't need to be perfect to win. You simply create a ticket of 4 to 10 simple player props and score points for the ones you get right. Your score determines your win, not the perfect ticket. You can be half right and be all right with Swagger. Swagger offers the most player props and biggest payouts of any DFS site, as many as 50 times your money. Plus, you can play fantasy football along with other major U.S. pro sports, as well as international soccer, Formula One, NASCAR, fight sports, rugby, cricket, and even esports. Ready to play? Visit playwithswagger.com/RotoWire to sign up, and Swagger will give you a $10 free to try them out, plus match your first deposit 100% up to $100. Swagger is daily fantasy for all fankind. So, Ryan, let's just talk real quick about who we think will be popular this week. And I actually want to mix up a little bit. Usually we start with quarterback here. I want to start with running back because I think that we've got a week this week where there are multiple running back options that are cheap due to injuries in front of them. They're going to be popular. We've got Ramondre Stevenson at 6,000. It sounds like there's going to be no Damian Harris. We have Kenneth Walker III at 5,400. Rashad Penny's out for the year. And we have possibly Eno Benjamin at 4,600. It sounds like Darrell Williams is going to be out. James Conner is up in the air, but didn't practice yesterday. I think he's probably going to be out. He's 4,600. It seems to me that there's going to be a lot of people going to play these three guys as their low price, high rostership is probably what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, especially in cash games. Yeah, I would be pretty comfortable just starting with those three. And then it just makes it really easy to pay up at the other positions. Ramondre Stevenson would project the best if Damian Harris is out. It's a pretty good matchup for New England on paper. against Cleveland's defensive line that's been struggling, and Stevenson would just, you figure, would get so much of the work in that New England offense. I mean, he had 25 carries last week. If the game script's going well, you could see 25, 30 touches there, including a few catches. Kenneth Walker, he's too cheap for, he's playing in the second best game environment, at least in terms of a total. No Rashad Penny, he should catch some passes too. So like those two for sure. And then if you get Eno Benjamin, you're gonna have to monitor that James Conner news. I don't know if it's gonna, if we're gonna know before the slate locks. So you might have to have a plan since that's the afternoon game. But I mean, Benjamin for 4,600. If Darrell Williams is out too, I mean, you could make the argument that he's as good, if not better, point per dollar than Stevenson just because he's so cheap. So I mean, those would be the backs for cash games for sure. And of course they're fine in tournaments as well.
Yeah, it's just it's a wild week where we just happen to have this big, huge game with expensive guys, and we have running back value. Like it doesn't always work out that way. Last week we had a lot of running back value, but like this one even sticks out even more with these injuries. I mean, I think that you mentioned Ramondre. Ramondre didn't only have 25 carries; he looked really good too. Like he looked the part. He looks like a better running back overall than Damian Harris if you're just watching with the eye test. I know Harris is good at the goal line, but Ramondre is super talented. Like, I think we forget. And not only that, the Browns have been abysmal versus the run. They're allowing 5.9 yards per carry, almost 20 fantasy points per game to running backs. Like, the matchup works. I know they're underdogs, so maybe you get a little game scripted out, but the matchup's pretty good. And you have to think that Belichick wants to stick with the run. I mentioned Walker. He had a 70-yard run last week, looked the part. And the guy was a stud at Michigan State. We knew that coming in. The issue with Walker was just that, Rashad Penny was good and in front of him too. The guy averaged over 6 yards per carry at Michigan State last year. Arizona's pretty average against the run. And not only is he cheap, but he's part of the second most popular game, the second highest total game. Like, it's just, it works so well. It's just, it's going to be interesting to see if people in tournaments try and get off these guys, if they just play them and try and get different somewhere else and, win elsewhere. Because you got to think, if you look at lineups, you just throw these three guys in, you throw Allen and Diggs in there, and suddenly, that's 5 of your 8 roster spots right there, 9 roster spots, depending on what you're playing. But it seems easy to get those first 5 or 6 guys in.
Yeah, it's going to be unbelievable if we get those 3 guys. It's going to be unbelievable how similar lineups are, to a point that we rarely see.
So does that make you think holy hell, I need to get a little bit different? Because
it has me worried. It's so hard to win big tournaments like that. You have to just be absolutely perfect in every spot. It's if you're a person that plays these tournaments more so with game theory, then this is the week for you. If you can stomach fading some of these spots, I mean, like you said, people will just put those 3 backs in, and then they'll put Allen and Diggs in, or Mahomes and Kelsey, or whoever from that game, and maybe someone from the Seattle game. I mean, you're going to actually get lineups that are duplicated in tournaments, a bunch of them, and that never happens. So yeah, I have to look for some way to get different. I mean, no, I'm not just going to put the same lineup in as everyone else.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm usually one that's I'm good eating some chalk, but I think I'm going to get a little bit different. I don't know whether it's going to be with a different quarterback receiver combo, or it's going to be maybe one expensive running back. I think these expensive running backs are going to be cheap, or going to be less roster than normal, just because you have these 3 easy spots down here. As we get lower, we'll talk about, there's some other cheap running backs that are really playable too. Real quick question in the chat. Someone's asking, who do we prefer between Raheem Mostert, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kenneth Walker III, and Eno Benjamin? That's a lot of names, and they're all pretty close in my rankings, but I'm going to go off the board, but I'm going to go Kenneth Walker Jr. this week. I like him the most of those 4 names.
I'm with you, Walker.
Sorry, Kenneth Walker the third. I don't mean to be talking about his dad, who's the junior, but yeah, the third. I go Walker there for Evan Graham, who asked that question. It's a pretty good mix, and as we get later here, I do like Raheem Mostert again, who's getting a lot of the work in that backfield. But I think I go Walker of that group, just in that high scoring game with Penny out. I like his chances there for sure.
Me too.
It's funny. I think the chalk easy plays at quarterback are kind of guys we've already alluded to. I think that Josh Allen 8,200 and Geno Smith at 5,700 are probably the two. If you go expensive, you go Allen or you go Mahomes. I mean, I think Allen will be more popular just because he's easier to stack receivers with. Mahomes, you have Kelsey, and then who the heck knows? I do have a receiver I like the most of that group, and we'll talk about later. But then Geno's 5,700. If you want to suddenly get expensive elsewhere, maybe play Diggs and Kelsey or something like that. You go Geno at 5,700. You pair him with Metcalf at 6,800 or Lockett at 5,600, which I think a lot of people will have. It lets you do pretty much almost anything you want to do. Also, you go Geno and Lockett and one cheap running back, you can pretty much pay for anybody else you want.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about these guys, like you said, for cash games. If we get all those cheap running backs, you pretty much just have to play Josh Allen. I mean, I'll have to play Josh Allen in cash. You could go down to, I agree, it's either that or you go down to Geno Smith.
Yeah.
Some might also throw Tom Brady in there for 600 more than Geno Smith, but no, I don't think that's necessary. If you're going to go down, you just go to Geno Smith. He's actually been running a little bit. I think he has the 6th or 7th most rushing yards in the league for a quarterback. Nothing crazy, but it's a few extra points for a guy that's 5,700. But again, yeah, Josh Allen projects the best and better than Mahomes because he runs and because they just throw so much.
And we talk about Josh Allen a lot, but he's been quarterback 5 or better every week so far this year. It's not like it's like, oh, he had a couple great games. Every single week he's been a quarterback 5. He was the best quarterback last week. He was quarterback 1. I mean, it's just in a game like this, they're going to have to score. There's no shutting it down in the second half, fourth quarter. They have a couple games last week that, they killed Pittsburgh, but it's just, it seems pretty easy.
It seems nailed on that he's going to score over 30. Like he scored over 30 points in every game except the bad weather game in Baltimore.
And was still a top 5 quarterback that week.
Right.
I think he had a rushing touch. I think he just got there. It's just their offense is just centered around him. They don't hand it off a lot in the red zone. It's just centered around him. He just does everything for them. We'll get into all these other positions. I think that Tyler Lockett at 5,600 is going to be very popular too. Just the price sticks out as just way too cheap. I mean, I think you mentioned he was 5,800 last week, and he had scored twice, had over 100 yards. And this price went down in a game that is against Arizona with a high total. It's just it's a weird little pricing mistake there. But the fact that he went down I thought he'd be like 6,500. He'd be 1,000 less than that. It's just I don't know. It's hard to get away from Lockett. I know Lockett has games in the past where he just kind of disappears, but he's been really good lately. I think Lockett at 5,600 just seems too obvious.
Yeah, too obvious. I mean, I wrote him up in my article for like the 3rd straight week. I think I just said you can't help it because everything you said and he hasn't had a bad game in any of these spots. He's getting a lot of targets. This is a good spot. So I mean, what are you going to do? I'm going to play him in cash games for sure because he projects as the best point per dollar play on the slate and he's going to be popular. That's one in tournaments where I'll try to get away from in some spots, especially if I'm not targeting that game. We're going to have to try to find some less popular guys in some spots. And, receiver is of course, Lockett can just catch 6 balls for 60 yards or whatever. And not, that's, it happens all the time. So I'll try to get away from that in tournaments, but you're right. He just projects way too good. So cash games, he's a lock.
It sure seems like cash games. You go Ramondre, Walker, Benjamin, Diggs, Allen, Lockett, and you've got
absolutely
right off the bat. It's football. They won't all work out, but boy, cash lineups kind of write themselves at least the first 5 or 6 spots. But let's jump into quarterback receiver game stacks. I think that we've kind of addressed some of these top 2 games here, but I think Allen and Diggs. Or you play Allen and Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis had a 98-yard touchdown, a 60-yard touchdown before we woke up last week. It was crazy. I'm still having breakfast, and Gabe Davis is going bonkers. But we talked about Allen, just incredibly consistent, great matchup, great game. The Chiefs are allowing an NFL leading 20.7 passing fantasy points per game. Great game script. It all lines up here. Diggs is 8,400, I think. Davis is 6,500. So if you want to get cheaper, go Davis. You go both of them. I think you just there's not much to talk about here, but the Allen receiver stack is good. But tell me about Kansas City on the other side of the game. I don't think we need to talk too much about Buffalo. If you're going to play Mahomes, are you going to go with Kelsey? Or are you going to go with Kelsey and a receiver? What would you do in terms of stacking Kansas City?
Yeah, stacking Kansas City is tough. So Kelsey, he seems like the only player in that game that's overpriced. Now I'm not sure, like right now I wouldn't say, okay, maybe not overpriced, but Diggs and Allen and Davis, the guys you just mentioned, and the other KC receivers, they're actually a little bit cheap for for the projections. But yeah, so I might try to stack it with Kelsey, but see, I think Kelsey will end up being kind of popular just because that game stack is so appealing. So I think if I'm going to stack Mahomes, it's going to be with some of these other wide receivers. Like the price on Valdez-Scantling looks great, 4,500. You could easily see him. Yeah, you could easily see him going for 100 yards and a touchdown. I know he hasn't done it yet, but he could smash his price tag. I don't even mind going with Mecole Hardman for 4K. I mean, he had some big catches last week, his best game of the season. It only takes one for that price. And if that game's a shootout, like people aren't going to play Hardman. They're going to play Rondale Moore. They're going to play Valdez-Scantling. They're going to go up for Lockett and some of these other guys. People do not like to play Hardman. I don't mind for 4K. And even Juju. I could play Juju too. You know, he hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but he's had 8 targets in 3 straight weeks. I mean, he's going to score a touchdown. He could even score 2. It's another guy that people won't be too excited about playing. So, you know, Kelsey's a fine play, of course. We saw a crazy stat line last week, 4 touchdowns on 25 yards.
Wild. Right? The stat I saw was that the lowest number of yards ever for a 4-touchdown game was 93 yards. It was Marvin Jones. Kelsey had 25. Like that's
like a fourth of that.
Like I don't know, cover him when they get to the 2-yard line. I don't know. Maybe it makes a lot of sense, but I think you laid out the Kansas City receivers pretty perfectly. Juju's had a lot of negativity on Twitter, but you're right. 8 targets in 3 straight games, 8 targets in 4 of the 5 games. I really like Valdez-Scantling. He's 4,500. I think he's probably going to be the most popular of this trio, but it seems to me like maybe he's emerging a little bit in this offense. He was 6 for 90 last week on 8 targets. Week before he had 63 yards. You know, maybe it seems like Mahomes is starting to trust him a little more. I like what we've seen the last couple of weeks from Valdez-Scantling, but you're right on Hardman. I think Hardman will be the 3rd most popular. And at 4,000 in this game, like that, there's another one. And you mentioned it only takes one. It really only takes one with Hardman. I mean, he gets loose and he's gone. He's so fast. And he's 4,000. I think you play any of them, but the hard part is I don't know that we can really tell you which one to nail because I think it's like Mahomes said at the start of the year. No. You play fantasy football, good luck figuring out our receivers because it's going to be a different guy every game. So it's obviously Kelsey in the red zone. It's obviously Kelsey for touchdowns. I think I go Valdez-Scantling first and Hardman second just based on price. Yeah, and that the Kansas City stack is going to be the less popular stack for sure. I mean, way less popular than the Bills. So if you're considering that Kansas City stack instead, I will encourage that for sure. And then that's the way I would stack it. I would take Mahomes with either Diggs or Davis, and then 2 of those receivers. Like I said, of course you can use Kelsey, but I would just do it the other way. Yeah, and you hope that when they get inside the 5, they hand it off to Singletary and instead of Josh Allen running it in, and suddenly you've got a pretty good little game script there. You know, he throws 2 touchdowns to Diggs or Davis, whoever you play, hands off 1 or 2 to James Cook or Moss or Singletary, doesn't score a running touchdown. Suddenly you've built up pretty nicely at a lower roster ship. Right, and sometimes I think of it that way, and like how are you going to fade Allen, or like you might need a Singletary touchdown here and there, but also, you really just need Mahomes to score 1 more point than Allen. I mean, right. Mahomes can score 40. Josh Allen can score 39. Yep. I mean, so his receivers, Diggs can go off, Davis can go off. But yeah, anyway. Yeah. So what about the other game? We mentioned the Geno Smith side of it. You can play him with Metcalf or Lockett pretty easily. Both are doing well. Geno's been quarterback 7 or better the last 3 weeks. I can't believe we're talking about Geno Smith like that, but Arizona started out badly against the pass. They've been a little bit better against the pass lately, but they do blitz a lot. Geno's been killing the blitz, so that that may work in his favor. But I want to talk about. I think that side's pretty easy to talk about. I want to talk about the other side. So I think if these 4 quarterbacks, I would say that Kyler Murray at 7,200 will be easily the least popular of the 4. Do you agree with that? Yeah, I do. And that's something that that's something that I'm monitoring. I think he'll be more popular than he has been, but yeah, you're right. Still the least popular of those 4. And this is a week where I want to roster Murray and maybe stack the Cardinals. I haven't done it yet this season, but I'm thinking about doing it here, especially if he's going to be the least popular of those 4. I did it once. It was not a fun experiment, but you can't in DFS. You can't hold a grudge. I think I had him 2 weeks ago where nobody had him, and it was against Carolina. I was like, this is a breakout kind of game. He still does not have DeAndre Hopkins back, which is, maybe bad for him, but good for stacking. Like, I think Hollywood Brown makes a ton of sense to stack with him. Hollywood Brown's been a target monster. I think Zach Ertz is interesting too if you want to play both. Zach Ertz had, I think, 10 more targets last week. And Zach Ertz has a score to work because it's like, it's going to be 10 targets to be 6 for 52. But if he scores, it works. And Hollywood Brown can obviously hit the big play. I think, Kyler can get loose a little bit. He had 42 yards rushing last week. It was his high for rushing. So he had a couple plays. They were big plays too. He only had 4 carries for 42 yards. So there's a big chunk plays in the running game. Starting to utilize that a little more. And you got to think this is a game where they're going to have to score. They've had some weird games so far. They did not play well against Philadelphia the first half and then came back. It was a weird game last week, but I think that Murray is a really interesting tournament play this week because you got the 2 big games. You hope for a lot of points. I always like to get the least popular of the 4. I think that's an interesting way to play that tournament. And he has an easy stacking option. You come back with either receiver pretty easily too. It maps out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. And you figure he actually has a chance to get there through the air for once in this spot, throw for a lot of yards, and especially if James Conner's out. If I stack him, I'm going to want 2 pass catchers because, again, you're probably going to need a big score to beat Allen and Mahomes or to beat at least one of them. So I for sure want Hollywood Brown. Like, you want Hollywood Brown going for over 100 with a touchdown or 2 in this spot, and then I will pair it with either Rondale Moore or Zach Ertz. You're right. I don't mind Ertz at all. And if he gets in the end zone, he could, that's all he needs with the amount of volume he'll get otherwise. And then, run it back with whoever you want. I don't mind running it back with Kenneth Walker.
Yeah,
of course you could go with one of those receivers, but it'd be nice if Kenneth Walker runs in a touchdown or 2, and then you have Arizona trying to come back.
Yeah, because I think you're right. Anybody who does play Kyler will probably just automatically go to Lockett, and you go Kenneth Walker at the exact same price. It's an interesting way to play this game and play it even a little more differently. You're already taking Kyler, but you take Walker also, who will be popular. But I think in an Arizona stack, I think Lockett will be the one everybody goes to. And Rondale Moore, I didn't mention when we were talking about that. You're right. That's a good play too. He looked pretty good last week. He was really active. He was involved, and he's only 4,200. If I'm doing the math, I'm scrolling down his price. He's only 4,200. He had 8 targets last week. He was 7 for 68. Really good, cheap part of that game. Seattle's also really bad against slot receivers so far this year. Rondale will line up in the slot a lot. So I think that Rondale with Hollywood or Ertz with Hollywood, and with Kelsey and Andrews on the slate, Ertz is not going to be popular. So that's another way to get interesting here. And then if you do that, you can kind of play some of the other chalky plays too. And you're so different at quarterback with Kyler and everybody else. You mentioned he won't be not rostered, but I think it's a good way to get a little different. You can still play some of the chalky running backs.
Yep. And then one last thing. I might favor DK over Lockett, or at least I might try to do that in some of my lineups just because, I don't know, he'll probably be half as popular. And I read something about Arizona's best cornerback is back and supposedly going to be on Lockett more of the time. Now, again, I don't want to read too much into that stuff. I forget his name, but it looks like a pretty good spot for DK Metcalf.
Yeah, no, and Metcalf's looked good the last couple of weeks, so that could work too. So real quick on quarterback stats. We've talked about the 2 games a lot. Where else are you thinking about going if you're in a tournament, you really want to get different here? I mentioned Brady and Cousins. Those are 2 guys that I am thinking about playing. What are you thinking about in terms of quarterback stacks aside from the two highly publicized games?
Yeah, I like where your head's at with the Brady and Cousins stuff. Those are the type of guys that, could win you a slate, like with a skinny stack, like you mentioned. Then you have some pieces from those other games. I don't know. I'm probably maybe Lamar, like I mentioned. Yeah. He's another one. I haven't really been stacking Baltimore this year. I don't know if I really have at all. And
same price as Mahomes and Allen. He's going to have to be the 3rd most popular of that trio, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'll be the 3rd most popular of that trio, probably less popular than Geno and Kyler, maybe even. Yeah. People aren't excited to stack Baltimore at the Giants. I mean, I'm not really either, but, I might force it because it's pretty easy. Like I mentioned, I think Andrews is a better play than Kelsey, and he's cheaper. And I think it's really easy you can add Duvernay in there as well with Bateman out. So I don't mind doing that. The tricky part is I don't really want to run it back with anyone on the Giants. I guess we'll have to see about this receiver situation. I guess Wan'Dale Robinson's supposed to play. Tony and Galladay are questionable. Slayton for 3,800 caught 6 of 7 targets.
If you do, you just do it with Saquon, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a lot, though. I don't think I could afford that. You know, if you got Lamar and Andrews, it's tough to get Saquon in there. So
it is. You're not playing any the big name Bills Chiefs. That's for sure. You're not playing, but it's the only guy in that offense that I remotely trust to get touches and be able to make plays. Though there's no way I'm playing one of those receivers.
Yeah,
so you're taking a dart throw at the receivers, and even more of a dart throw than we normally take. Like Slayton was the one that was the best last week, but if I did, I'd probably go Saquon and figure it out. But I hate their pass offense.
Right. Yeah. If I do it, I will probably I won't run it back with the Giant. You're right.
Yeah, you could do that too. Risky. Brady's interesting. Brady's 6,300. The only problem is they're a pretty big favorite in this game against Pittsburgh. You wonder if they kind of set the second half, but Tom Brady has thrown 52 passes the last 2 weeks, each of the last 2 weeks. Like that's a ton of passes. We talk, and his guys are back. Evans has been back. Godwin's been back. Godwin sat a lot in the second half last week, but he was playing. He had 385 and 351 yards last 2 weeks. I know he only had one touchdown one of those games. We had 3 in the other one. He only has more than one touchdown once all year, but like with his guys back, he is clearly throwing the ball a lot. He's cheap. Even Evans, I think, is just 7,000. Godwin's not expensive. You could play a receiver pretty easily. The problem here is the comeback also. Like, I guess you go George Pickens, and he's been pretty active with Kenny Pickett, but like it's a game that you're like, I don't know if I want to play too much in this game. I think you just go one receiver and maybe someone come back in Pittsburgh and get expensive elsewhere. But I think Brady works, and Cousins Cousins is too cheap. I think he's 6,000. You have to stack him with Jefferson. I think you have to pay up there because it's hard to get to Jefferson this week if you play any of the big games. Lamar was great against Miami. So was Joe Burrow. So was Josh Allen. Those are great quarterbacks. They're good lines to field, but Miami's giving up points. They're allowing 8.2 yards per attempt. I think this lines up really well. In a normal week, I would love this Cousins-Jefferson matchup. It's hard to get there with all the other matchups we have, but in a normal week, like this one would stick out pretty good to me at 6,000. So maybe it's a way to get a little different.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way, actually. I mean, I'm just thinking about it as you're saying it. Like, Justin Jefferson can easily be the highest scoring player on this slate, and he's not going to be popular. He's not going to be popular with these other games. He's just not. And same for Tampa. I would have been more excited about Tampa, but they just really let me down last week. I was all over Tampa. They just didn't do it. Fournette did it. I went with the passing game. But maybe, I shouldn't be off them so easy. Now they get this Pittsburgh matchup that Buffalo just destroyed Pittsburgh. Buffalo was the winning stack last week. Yeah, could easily be Tampa this week. And Mike Evans, he's another one. Like, Evans catches 3 touchdowns. We see it all the time, and he ends up as the highest scoring receiver. He's not going to be popular either. Honestly, Scott, those are 2 great recommendations. Like, that's how you win a slate like this with players who are going to be 5% owned, 10% owned max, maybe in some contests. But those are the type of chances you have to take. And like
I think 10% is a max too. Like, I don't think the quarterbacks will be close to that.
Right. No, they won't be. 5%, maybe less. You're right.
Jet, you're right. On Jefferson, Evans, they might be. I think that obviously can play 3 or 4 receivers, so those guys will get some rostership. But I don't think anybody's taking Cousins and Brady. It'll be It's a fun way to get different. And I think that it may be we talk next week. It's like, oh, Kansas City Buffalo was 38-35, and everybody that won had those. But these are slates where if you play tournaments, you want to get a little different. There are tons of opportunities to do so with really good plays.
Right. It doesn't mean it's the wrong move. I mean, if you take a chance on one of these other spots and the other game goes nuts, I mean, that's going to happen a lot. I mean, that's just what
there's going to be some high scoring games elsewhere besides Buffalo and KC, and it's just going to happen, and you gotta hit on the right ones. But let's jump into the other positions. But first, a note from our sponsors at No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play in pickup contests versus other players for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all your picks. Bet on up to 5-player over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up with the promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the App Store to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not how you play, but also where you play. You don't want to miss out on this. So Ryan, I looked at No House Advantage this week, and last week I hit a couple player props. It worked well, so hopefully it helped people out this week. Just let's talk a couple real quick that were on the site. Give me a couple of over unders that you find yourself liking when you look at the No House Advantage app.
Sure. Well, I decided not to pick any unders this week because I tried
I bullied you into not taking unders anymore.
I mean, it was the right move. I said friends don't let friends bet the under, and you're right. I tried to hit some Steelers unders, and Pickett went way over. So taught me a lesson. But anyways, this week, the first one, Aaron Rodgers over 1.5 touchdowns, home against the Jets. It's funny to say, but this is close to a must-win spot for the Packers after that disaster last week. And Rodgers, he's struggled. The receivers have struggled. It's tough with those new weapons. He's really going to want to throw some touchdowns this week, and it's the perfect matchup. So Rodgers over 1.5. I like that. And then the other one, I'm going to take the over on Ramondre Stevenson. I believe it was 83 or 85 or something.
83.5 rush yards.
83.5. Yeah. I mean, with Damian Harris out, this is assuming Damian Harris is out. Ramondre, he's going to rush for over 100 in this spot. So that's a pretty easy one. What about you? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little similar to you. I'm gonna take a couple overs because I'm a sucker. I love the overs. I'm gonna go Kirk Cousins over 1.5 total touchdowns. We talked about him earlier. I think that he throws he'll throw a couple. Maybe we're going 2 to Jefferson, maybe 1 to Jefferson, 1 to Thielen, maybe an Irv Smith in there. But I like this matchup from Minnesota. I think that against Miami, and I think that Cousins will get in there. Maybe he drops one off to Dalvin Cook too. That'll work also. And then I'm gonna go a little bit of. I'm not only going to over. I'm gonna go over and homer pick in the same pick. I'm gonna go Jeff Wilson over 68.5 rush yards. I know he split carries last week with Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman looked pretty good, but Jeff Wilson's still the guy. He was like at 90% carries the 2 weeks before that. I get that they want to use Coleman a little bit, but not only is Jefferson, the guy here, it's a good game script matchup. The Niners are favored by, I think, 6.5 over Atlanta. Fast track there. And Jeff Wilson is really freaking fast. Like if he gets through the first line, he's gone. He had a touchdown last week that we saw him show off that speed. So give me Jeff Wilson. I think he gets, maybe 80 to 90 yards, maybe triple digits, but 68.5 just felt too low to me. So that's where I'm going to go there. We thank No House Advantage for their sponsorship on the podcast. And we just wanted to, go through a couple of, it's a really fun little site to play on. So it's kind of fun to just pick some over-unders there. I want to talk about running backs real quick. We had a question in the chat from Rick Herrera. Ryan, would you drop Kenny Pickett to pick up Russell Wilson? I certainly would. I know Russ has been rough, but still like his weapons, and I still would do it over Pickett. I think that the Steelers' offense is kind of a mess.
Yeah, I might be the biggest Russ hater, but I think I would. I think I would have to do that as well. Yeah.
It's who knew 6 weeks ago we'd be talking about Kenny Pickett versus Russell Wilson being a real question. So it's funny how the season works. So we talked a lot about the mid-range running backs that are going to be popular this week with Stevenson and Eno Benjamin and someone else in there that I'm forgetting, Kenneth Walker. The expensive guys are going to be tough to get to this week. We've talked about a lot about the top couple games, but in this top tier, we have Christian McCaffrey, 8,300, and their offense is terrible. It finds a way to score every week, it seems like. Nick Chubb is 8,200. Jonathan Taylor's probably going to play. We don't know that yet, but 8,000. Saquon, 7,700. Aaron Jones, 75. Dalvin Cook, 75. And Fournette, 7,400 on DraftKings. I don't think it's in a range that a lot of people are going to get to very often this week, which it makes them really interesting because these are really good players. If you have to go an expensive running back this week, you want to get different a little bit. Where are you going amongst this tier?
Yeah, I might go all the way up to McCaffrey.
Wow. All right. I did not expect that. I like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it either. He's the cheapest salary he's been all season. Okay. Now, obviously that's for a reason. He hasn't done well, but he had 12 targets last week and 9 the week before. I didn't like him last week against San Fran. He caught 7 passes, got in the end zone, still had a good game. 9 catches the week before that. You figure they're going to have to throw him the ball. Especially in this matchup against the Rams defense. So yeah, and I like it because, like you said at the top, these guys are probably not going to be that popular with the cheap running backs we have,
Right.
and with people wanting to play expensive QBs and receivers. So like, it's a reason to maybe try and force it. So yeah, I don't mind McCaffrey for that price tag. What about you? Is there a guy in this top range that sticks out to you?
I'm gonna be really boring. I'm gonna go back to the well again with Nick Chubb. I think that he's so good right now. 17 for 134 and 2 touchdowns last week. He's not involved in the pass game. I get everybody says he doesn't catch any passes, but dude, if you're getting 900 yards every week and score every week, like I don't really care that much. I'd love to see it. And the crazy thing about last week, I don't know why you'd be watching Browns or whoever they played, but Jacoby Brissett missed him on what would have been like a 60-yard touchdown pass. Too. Like he had kind of it was a route where Brissett just kind of broke out and Chubb just kind of took off. And it was like, it would have been in stride. He would have had one guy to beat and nobody stopped. I don't think there's any doubt he would have beat the guy. It was right there. It would have been a huge play. And Brissett missed him by like 1.5 yards. And it was just so frustrating because you never get those opportunities with Chubb. But he's averaging over 6 yards a carry. They're a home favorite. Like they're favored over New England. Like this is a pretty good game script for Chubb too. He has over 100 total yards in every game. He has over 100 yards rushing in 4 of the 5. Then got the receiving yards a little bit in one game. So he's 8,200. Nobody's going to play him. Like you have him right next to McCaffrey, in between McCaffrey and Taylor. Like I think I'm going back to Chubb this week. I think that until he lets me down, I can kind of keep going back to the well. But I think this whole range can be pretty under rostered compared to normal. I think that it's hard to get there with if you want to play Mahomes and Allen, you want to play the tight ends, you want to play Diggs. I think it's a range that if you can find your guy that you really love, these are all guys that can go crazy. You can really have a step up on the competition.
Yeah, I think you might have swayed me on Chubb. Just like no one is going to play Chubb. Like he just continues to crush. And I mentioned that like people might not get up to McCaffrey, but Chubb is going to be about a fifth as popular as McCaffrey. I mean, no one's going to play Chubb. He's for sure going to be under 5%. So yeah, agree.
Yeah, he's probably been the best running back in football, at least in just terms of just pure rushing and so far this year. So we mentioned the guys in the mid-range can be popular. I don't think we need to dwell on those two guys too much, but between 5,000 and 7,000, there's some other names in here that may get lost a little bit. We've got Alvin Kamara coming off a huge game at 6,700. Didn't go up in price that much. He was 6,600 last week. You talked about him last week, loving the price. I'm surprised he didn't go up. He had 100 yards rushing and 91 yards receiving. Jeff Wilson, we talked about during the No House Advantage party. He's 6,200. He was really good last week too. Breece Hall had 97 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving last week. He's 5,800. Raheem Mostert's 5,700. He had Chase Edmonds kind of out of this mix right now. He had less snaps than Myles Gaskin last week. Mostert was 18 for 114. And we talk about guys who can bust one. You give me Raheem Mostert in space, I'll take him over any running back in the NFL. He's that fast. Do you consider any of these guys, or is it just too hard to get away from the popular guys?
No, I'm definitely considering these guys. Yeah, definitely Alvin Kamara. Really like that price tag still. It's just too cheap. I mean, way too cheap. On other weeks, if there wasn't this value, we didn't have some of these injuries, I'm sure people would be talking about Kamara as one of the top plays this week. And especially if one or two of those receivers are out. All of their receivers are listed as questionable. I don't think Mike Thomas is going to play. I don't know about Olave with that concussion, but looks like a really good spot to me for Kamara. And actually, Mixon, if you like the Cincinnati side, Mixon projects like just as well as Kamara. Both those guys are too cheap in that Cincinnati New Orleans game. So I'm looking there. What about you?
It's an interesting point on Mixon. He has not looked good. And there's a lot of talk this week about, they keep giving the ball in the red zone and he keeps struggling. He didn't have more than 82 yards as most. I think that was week 1. And he doesn't catch the ball a ton either. He had, 7 receptions week 1, but hasn't been more than 4 since. So I think if you want Joe Mixon, this is going to be as low roster he's going to be with the high popular names that running back and Kamara right there. Also, I think Mixon will be very, very low roster. I think it's an interesting tournament play. I probably agree with you on Kamara. I think he looked so good last week. He looked finally healthy, I think was the key. And 6 targets is really important. Maybe may depend who plays quarterback. We don't know if it's going to be Jameis or Andy Dalton. The problem is Taysom Hill keeps stealing red zone touches.
Yeah.
Hill had 3 touchdowns rushing and 1 passing last week. Kamara was great last week, but that's frustrating. Give me a couple of those for Kamara.
He could have had a huge game.
Yeah, he really could have. I mean, he could have had 2 touchdowns instead of Hill, and takes 2 of those and take 2 of those 4 away, and you got a huge game. But I do like that. I worry a little. Breece Hall looks good, but I worry a little bit in Green Bay. Green Bay is a pretty big favorite. It's not the best game script for a running back, but Green Bay's allowing 5.1 yards per carry to running backs. They've not been good against the run. So I think, Hall could work too. I like Mostert. It's hard to get some of those guys with Walker and Benjamin right there. But I think my favorite in the range I agree with you. I think I'd go Kamara. I just think he's underpriced.
Yeah. And just about Breece Hall, I agree with what you said, but it's a cheap price tag and he's projecting pretty well. If Benjamin, if we didn't get the Benjamin value, like I was considering Breece Hall as like the third cheap guy for cash. Not just me, but other people will too. He's going to be pretty popular at that price tag. So
he was freaking tackled the 1 yard line twice last week.
Mm-hmm.
And both times they brought Michael Carter and he scored. I was like, you got to be
right.
I was like, you got to be kidding me. The guy's got 200 yards of offense. You can't give him a touch at the one. I felt like I was watching Varsity Blues all over again. Not let the running back score at the 1 yard line. It was driving me crazy.
Yeah, he should have had a huge game, and he still had 30 points. He still had a huge game.
Still had a huge game, but man, it could have been monster. Just Michael Carter vulturing those touchdowns down the stretch there. But I think it's a range. It's about the most options we've had at running back between 5,500, or I guess you could include Benjamin. So 4,500 and 7,000. There are so many names you could play. Last week they all got there. I don't think that'll happen again. That's a rarity. So picking right here will be key. But if you want to get a little different off the highly popular guys, I think there's many ways to do it this week. We mentioned 4 or 5 right there. The high popular guys are gonna be popular for a reason. They're gonna be they're highly owned for a reason. But you can get different in kind of similar price ranges if you want to.
Yep.
Let's talk receiver. We've talked a lot about running backs and quarterbacks. Let's talk receiver. But first, a note from our sponsors at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, we got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit match instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So in the same vein, we've got, we talked about the expensive running backs with expensive receivers. I think we've already talked about Diggs, going to be very popular, 8,400. We talked about Justin Jefferson a little bit, not going to be very popular, but, chance to be a big game. Cooper Kupp is 9,700. Seems almost impossible to play on the slate this week. Like, unless you really you could go Geno and some cheap running backs and kind of do it to get different. But I don't think there's going to be many people playing Kupp this week. He's a little banged up too, but, he's got over 100 yards in 4 or 5 games. We got other in this range. We got Jamar Chase at 7,700, Deebo Samuel 7,600, Tyreek Hill at 7,500. Are you finding yourself playing any of these guys that are not named Stephon Diggs?
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe Jefferson. You made a pretty good case for Jefferson. I think if you want to play Kupp, this will be about the lowest, the least popular you'll ever see Kupp.
I think so too.
So I don't know if he can go for 35. You might have a chance. I don't know. That's tough. You mentioned he's banged up and the price is way up there.
Yep.
What happened with Deebo Samuel last week? I was all over Deebo, and I don't know, maybe game script affected him a little, but I don't know. I was going to ask you about Deebo, you being the San Francisco guy, because I can always get behind Deebo against Atlanta. It's a guy that has 3 touchdown upside, and it's a guy that just no one's going to play. So maybe like a guy like Deebo could be your 5% owned guy. I was considering that at least. I couldn't do Tyreek Hill with Skylar Thompson. I believe that's his name at quarterback. I don't know. What do you think?
I think Jimmy got to Deebo. He had 9 targets last week. It's not like he wasn't that involved. He just had 2 catches and 20 yards. A lot of the targets were kind of bad. And you're right, though. I mean, Deebo can have a big game at point. The only thing to think about with Deebo as we move forward here, and he's still priced like he's a number 1 receiver. I think the way they used Tevin Coleman last week, everybody's like, Tevin Coleman's taking Jeff Wilson's snaps and carries. I actually don't think he is. I think he's taking Deebo's carries, which is the problem. I mean, when Wilson was dropped out, I think he had like 58% of touches the running backs, but it was that Coleman took him and not Deebo. Deebo only had 2 rushes. It seems to me he had 8 rushes the first week, and then he has 4, 5, 2, and 2. And last year, as we went late in the season, it was those touchdowns rushing that really got him, over the top, and he was awesome for. He's a great receiver, but that you add that boost in there was really nice. I think the problem is that if Coleman and Wilson are both healthy, I think Kyle's going to do whatever he can to not really ride Deebo in the run game. Maybe a couple plays here and there to be different, but not the lineup in the backfield, give him the ball 6 times, which you want from fantasy angle. If I were going to go fully different here and play someone at under 5%, mine would be Jamar Chase at 7,700. Marcus Lattimore might not play, which would be big here. We might not get T. Higgins either. T. Higgins was kind of a surprise standing on the sideline last week, didn't play a ton. Chase had a lot of shallow targets, hasn't been over 85 yards since week 1. But the Saints have some big games to receivers. Chase 7,700, I don't think anybody's going to play. I think it's going to be just an easy kind of scroll past. He was only 759 against Baltimore on Sunday night, but he had 12 targets. I think Jamar Chase here has the upside big explosion game he always has. Always has that possibility. 7,700 and nobody's playing him. I think he's a very interesting tournament play this week.
Yep, that's it. I'm changing my pick to Chase for sure. Especially if Lattimore is out, like that's all I needed to hear. Higgins banged up, and also like I'm totally off Debo. Like if he's not getting 8 carries, like that's why you play him. So I agree with everything you said there. So I won't be taking a chance on Debo, but absolutely Jamar Chase.
Yeah. And we saw it with Debo 2 weeks ago against the Rams. Like, if he can catch that short pass and take it to the house, like, there's nobody does that better after the catch than him. But, like, you're kind of counting on that. It's just, it's hard to get by. Last week, he had the short touchdown, but I don't know. Their offense is just is stuck in the mud still a little bit. I know they looked good last week against Carolina, but, like, a lot of that was the defense. The defense scored. The defense set them up well. I'm still not fully on board with the offense. I love Brandon Ayuk so much, but it's just hard to get behind a guy. And they keep talking about, hey, Ayuk's playing great. I'm like, yeah, but we're talking fantasy football here. Like, we want to talk about real football. Brandon Ayuk is a great player, looks good, looks sharp, catches the ball, but just not enough volume and not enough red zone stuff. It just doesn't work fantasy wise right now.
Right. And, we need massive scores from these receivers, especially when they're priced up like Debo. And that's usually we're going to need a massive game from Jimmy. And, we haven't really seen that. We're going to need 300 yards from Jimmy. We want Debo to have 150. That stuff, it just seems not very likely the way things are going.
In the 7th round, we've already talked about Marquise Brown. We've already talked about Mike Evans. So I'm going to jump down a little bit in this mid-range here. Say, I don't know, 5,000 to 7,000. We talked about Metcalf. We talked about Gabe Davis in here. We talked about Tyler Lockett in here. Like, all the guys in here are players we talked about in these big games. They're going to be popular. So what else does one do in here? If you want some receivers in the 5,000 or 6,000, you want to get a little bit different off Metcalf, off Davis, off Lockett, but might have some big games. Where are you going here? Because I think this is a spot, if you want to get different, you could do so. There's going to be a lot of guys here that are going to be very lowly rostered. They're still pretty good players, but they don't stick out very much. So as you dug in here, what were you seeing here in this range?
I don't know. Like,
it's a hard range, right? Like,
it's a hard range. Yeah.
There's the 3 guys we mentioned: Metcalf, Lockett, and Gabe Davis. And you're like, it's a pretty big drop off to try and find guys that have anywhere near the upside of those 3.
Right, it really is. So, like, Christian Kirk is interesting in that his price came way down. He was 6,600 in consecutive weeks, and people were excited about him until he got 3 targets. So, like, I don't know, you can make an argument for Christian Kirk. Drake London, his price went down. I don't know. I could see, like, Drake London's projecting well at some places that I'm seeing. I could see that. I don't know. If I had to pick one in just this whole range, 5,000 to 7,000 that you named, I think I would stick in that Bills game. I would stay in that Bills Chiefs game and maybe take a shot on Isaiah McKenzie. Going to be back after 1 week. People just probably will forget about him a little. Crowder's out. And, Shakir was popular last week filling in for McKenzie. I think McKenzie will just step back into the slot role and play most of the snaps. I think he has upside for 5K, and I don't think he'll be very popular.
Yeah, I like that as a call too. I think that if he doesn't play, I think Shakir will be very popular, and we'll talk about the cheap guys.
Yeah. Sorry, McKenzie. He's not even on the injury report.
Oh, okay,
He's
so there you go.
Fully cleared concussion protocol. Yeah.
Oh, I like that then, because I think people still will probably play Shakir just because he was so good last week, and I think that McKenzie slides through, and I don't think there's any reason why he doesn't slide right back into the slot role too. I looked at Christian Kirk there. I think that the prices dipped. He only had 3 targets last week. Jacksonville laid a huge egg last week. Trevor Lawrence looked bad, and they just they did not look good against Houston. The only other guy I mentioned here is Jacoby Myers at 5,300. He's back after 2 missed games. He had 8 targets last week, 7 for 111 and a touchdown. Nice game script. They're dogs to Cleveland. He has 27 targets in 3 games he's played. I don't think this is New England, or New England's not really a passing game you really want to target and get aggressive with. But if you want to be a little different, I think Myers is 5,300 with the targets does work pretty well there.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have wrote him off. Is Mac Jones back or?
I don't think we fully know yet, but I think it's probably going to be Bailey Zappi. And if it is,
yeah,
I probably prefer that actually.
Yeah, I might prefer that too. But yeah, no, those are massive target numbers for Jacoby Myers. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Under 5,000. We've talked about a lot of these guys too. We talked about Devin Duvernay. If Bateman sits again, he's a really nice play. We talked about Valdes-Scantling. We talked about Rondale Moore. We talked about Khalil Shakir. Is there anybody else? We talked about George Pickens. He's in here too. I kind of like Romeo Dobbs. I always mess that up. What is it?
Yeah, I heard the announcer saying Dobbs in London last week.
Let's go with the London announcer then. I go Dobbs. 4,800 there. He was quiet last week, but he's got 21 targets the last 3 weeks, and he's got Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. I think the Dobbs at 4,800 is a really nice play. That it's going to be a week where nobody goes to that because there's so many other options. I think everybody's going to go MVS, Hardman, Rondale Moore, especially at 4,200. I think Alec Pierce at 4,300 is mildly interesting. He's really getting more involved in this offense. Again, you're tying yourself to Matt Ryan, which we don't love. He was 4 for 80 on 6 targets and 8 for 81 on 9 targets the last 2 weeks. So really getting involved. He's clearly the number 2 right there behind Pittman. And it's a play that I think if you want to get a little different and be off the big games down here, you could play Pierce at 4,300 and that could work.
Yeah, I agree. We have about 7 or 8 guys in this range that all look like decent plays. Like you mentioned, the 2 most popular will be Valdes-Scantling and Rondale Moore. But all those other guys that in that range that we mentioned are pretty good plays. Yeah.
A lot more options down here than there have been the last couple of weeks. I found myself searching for options here the last couple of weeks. So I think that's really interesting. Someone asked in the chat about Tyler Boyd if T. Higgins does not play. I looked at that and he had 61 snaps last week, but he had 4 targets, 3 catches. I don't know. I didn't get super excited about Tyler Boyd when I saw it, but yeah, if Higgins doesn't play, I think he's 5,100. Boyd is definitely very live. I think I prefer other guys in the range a little bit more when I looked at it closely.
Yeah, I do too. But a question from Alex. That's a good call. That's one of those that, if Higgins isn't out, Boyd will be like way less popular than these other guys. I mean, and
he's a good player too.
Right. And I'm with Scott where I don't love it. But could you see him getting over 100 and a touchdown? For sure. We saw him have some 2 touchdown games. And of course he can do that with Burrow and with no Higgins. That's the type of leverage play that you're going to need on this slate.
Yeah, I do like that. And he's a good player at 5,100. I think I like the other games more, but
me too.
I think that
I just like his idea. That's the right idea.
Yeah. So let's talk tight ends a little bit. We've talked again a bunch about Kelsey. We talked about Mark Andrews. Kelsey's 7,800. Mark Andrews is 7,000. Nice bounce back game. And you drop way down. George Kittle's 5,100. I would love to play George Kittle, but again, he had 6 targets last week, his most so far, but 547. They're using him on these quick plays and get the ball out of Jimmy's hands. It's not that he used to go downfield and break tackles, and they're not using him that way, and they haven't for a while. So I think I need to see it before I get there with Kittle. If he was 4,000 or something like that, sure, then I play George Kittle for the upside. But at 5,100, I can't do it. We talked about Ertz. He's 4,900, 10 more targets last week. That works with a Kyler stack. Where else are you going at tight end? If you need to save some money at tight end, you can't afford Kelsey, you can't afford Andrews. You want to play some of these guys. You want to maybe stick in a Chase or someone with Diggs or play a Chubb or McCaffrey. You want to save money at tight end. Where are you kind of going down the board here?
Okay, I have a few guys that I'm considering for cash games. It looks like it's going to be the same as last week. Higbee was the most popular and. He's $300 more now. He had 7 catches on 10 targets. Wasn't a huge game, 7 for 46, but still another 10 targets. So 4,600 for Higbee looks pretty good for cash games. Also, the guys you mentioned, Ertz and Andrews project really well. But if I'm going cheaper, so I've thought about I thought about Hayden Hurst, especially if T. Higgins was out. I also thought about Irv Smith Jr. 3,300, 3,200. I mean, I'm just looking for guys who can maybe catch 5 balls, get in the end zone, and those two can do it for that price. I was going to ask you, I saw Evan Ingram had 10 targets last week, caught 6 balls. So you got a bunch of guys in this price range. And then even in Bill stacks, I'd consider Dawson Knox if it looks like he's going to play. Dawson Knox hasn't done anything this year. No one's going to really use him in stacks. And he's going to have games this season where he catches 2 touchdowns, assuming he's healthy. So I don't know. I'm looking in that low 3K range. Who stands out for you?
Yeah, above the low 3K range, I think that David Njoku is still pretty playable again. He's 4,000, but he had 6 for 88 last week, 3 straight weeks over 70 yards. Like, I think we thought the David Njoku breakout was like going to be 4 years ago, but maybe we're finally getting it. But if you want to get really cheap, I like the names you like. I also like, I think Noah Fant at 3,000 is interesting in that Seattle game where you're going to want some plays there. He does split time with Will Dissly, which is frustrating, but he had 5 targets last week. He's 349. He's a guy that can hit a big play. He hasn't topped 50 yards yet, but Arizona's been struggling against tight ends, although they've faced good ones. They've faced Kelsey, Darren Waller. They faced Dallas Goedert also. But they're allowing 9.3 yards per target to tight ends, so that could work there. The other name down here is an interesting one, Cade Otton in Tampa Bay. He's someone that he would need Cameron Brate not to play again. That would be the key. But he had 7 targets last week. He was 6 for 43. And, you give me a game where I can pair up a guy with Tom Brady at 2,900 that, maybe scores a touchdown. Otton played 74 snaps last week. Like, he was the guy with Brate out. There was not like Brate's out, let's play 12 guys. It was pretty much Cade Otton. He had 43 snaps. He had 4 targets the week before that. So very heavily involved in the offense. It would need Brate not to play. But if you're going to go punt down here, 2,900, I think for Otton, if you get 5 or 6 targets, I think that'll work out just fine for the price.
Yeah, absolutely. If Brate's out, I would have no problem with Otton. In that same game, if I see Frymuth's also in concussion protocol, Gentry 2,600 caught 5 of 6 targets last week. I was just wondering why he's like high up there in the projections right now. That's because he's 2,600, and if Frymuth's out, people would probably use Gentry in cash games, to be honest, if you didn't have like Cade Otton. People like to use that min price tight end whenever they can.
Yeah. And he had 5. You mentioned the targets. He had 5 catches last week. So it worked really well there too. We have options all over the board this week. It's a really fun week. You can play so many different. We talked about how cash lamps might look really similar, but there are a lot of different ways to go, and there are other spots, which makes it a lot of fun. What about defense? You've got we don't have the chalk defense like we had the last couple weeks. We had it was Dallas last week, and I forget who was it. Dallas the week before too. Was it Dallas both weeks? I forget who it was the week before. But
yeah, it might have been. Yeah,
2 and they came.
Oh no, that was 2 weeks. That was before.
Yeah, but they came through both times. But I don't really feel like we have that easy chalk defense this week. You got to play defense, and this is a week where maybe your defense might decide something, because there's gonna be a lot of similar lineups out there, especially in cash games. Where the heck does one go at defense this week? I think it's the toughest week to find an obvious cheap defense that we've had.
I think it's the toughest week as well. I think like for defenses under 3K. I think some people will look at the Saints. I don't love it, but I think I get it against Joe Burrow. You can maybe get some sacks and some turnovers.
Since his offensive line is struggling, I could see that.
Yeah, at least they're projecting. Who can really project defenses? But in these defensive projections, the Saints stand out above these other teams. I don't love it. I mean, I'm hoping maybe you can give me one down here, but I'm gonna choose the Jaguars actually for 3K as a defense that I don't really think anyone will go to them. They had 21 fantasy points against Indy in their first meeting, 3 picks and 5 sacks against Matt Ryan. But also, I believe the Colts are going to go with like 3 new offensive linemen. I'll have to check on that, but they switched last game. They benched a couple guys, brought in a rookie or 2. So they're going to have some new starters for this game. Take a shot on the Jags. Maybe. I don't know. Who do you got?
So I have 2 down here in the cheap range. One of them was Jacksonville at 3,000. I think that give me someone against Matt Ryan. I think that's gonna be a common theme for me this week. The other one is actually New England at 2,900. They have multiple sacks in 4 of 5 games. They've scored the last 2 weeks. They've been getting after defense, and I love Nick Chubb, but I don't love Jacoby Brissett. He could clearly make a mistake. So at under 3,000, I think it's a game where the underdogs. I don't always love that on the road. It's a tough setup, but a game where they just need one mistake, multiple sacks and 405, like I mentioned, I think that works well. The defense I like that's kind of mid-range. I think if people are going to go up, they're going to go with the Rams against PJ Walker. They're going to go with Tampa against Kenny Pickett. I like Baltimore this week at 3,600. I think if you can get there, I like them to. I think the Giants' run of this the 4-1. I think it's going to end right now. I like them to really mess with Daniel Jones. I think that Baltimore's a smart defense. I think they're going to make Daniel Jones make 2 or 3 mistakes. I think Baltimore's going to hit a big play on defense this week. So I like that as a kind of just a feel play. 3,600, a little bit cheaper than the popular top ones. I don't think anybody's going to be popular, and then more expensive than the ones the bottom people will play. I think people will try and get low on defense this week to play these. We obviously have 2 huge games everybody's want a piece of. So I like Baltimore 3,600, probably my favorite defense this week.
Yeah, I like that too. I want to ask you about one more.
Yeah.
Can we play the Falcons?
Why do you always pick on the 49ers?
I mean, it's a home matchup against Jimmy G. We're looking for like a min-price defense. I just had to throw it in there.
I mean, it works because Jimmy can always make a mistake. I just think that if the game script comes out anywhere near, I think the Niners are going to try and run the ball 40 times.
Yeah, you're right. It ends up being like not a good spot.
Yeah, if somehow the Falcons if the Falcons get up 13-3 or something, then it becomes like a great spot all of a sudden. So for a defense, I guess it works. But like if it anywhere near the game, I think Kyle's going to try and run the ball 35, 40 times this week.
Yep. And then one other thing, doesn't have to do with defense, but
is it more picking on Jimmy? Is more picking on Jimmy G?
No, but I just realized when you said it, I didn't realize that PJ Walker was going to be starting. I only bring that up because I mentioned McCaffrey. I would want to check how McCaffrey's fared in the passing game with Walker. But just when I heard you mention Walker, it took me off McCaffrey pretty quickly. Anyway.
Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned Falcons a nice pick for a sneaky D, West Coast team traveling. The West Coast team, the 49ers are actually not traveling this week. They stayed in West Virginia this week and practiced. Can't remember the name of the resort, but they it helps a little bit. They didn't go cross country because they played Carolina last week. But it is an early game there, and the Niners. Jimmy can always throw a pick six. There's no doubt about that. But I think the game script works out. Last one thing I want to mention, since we're talking Niners Falcons, if Kyle Pitts plays, he's 4,200. Is there any way that you play Kyle Pitts at 4,200 against the Niners defense?
I could be talked into Pitts. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Can he outscore Higbee, Ertz, and Njoku that range? I don't know. Yeah, like are the Niners? Do they shut down tight ends? I don't know.
The Niners shut down everybody right now. Hey, the Niners give up 7 points to Seahawks, who have scored everybody. I think the Niners defense is awesome, but I think it makes sense. I think that he's 4,200 is the price now. We're like, oh my God, it's Kyle Pitts. Like I know it's been awful, but he has all the talent in the world in one big play. Like the Niners is tough because they have Greenlaw and Fred Warner at linebacker, who might be I'm not gonna call them the best 1-2 linebackers, but they're certainly in the discussion. There are some other really good ones, but maybe a top 5 group there. They're going to cover they'll cover linebacker a lot. But Emmanuel Mosley's out for the Niners. Jimmy Ward broke his hand. The Niners are missing 6 starters on defense. Like it's pretty crazy what they've done so far. They're missing Azeez Al-Shaair, Jimmy Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, and then Bosa might not. That's if Bosa doesn't play, and I don't think they're going to risk him on the turf this week with Kansas City on the schedule next week. Javon Kinlaw's out. Eric Armstead's not going to play. That's 6 starters on a defense that is obviously really deep and has played really well. But yeah, I think that at some point that has to take an effect. So I think it's interesting. By the way, the Niners stayed at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. Name just popped in my head. So that's where the resort where they stayed on the other side of the country in practice. They usually do that when they have 2 East Coast games. But anyway, I feel like
Greenbrier, I think is that they play a PGA Tour event.
There's a PGA Tour event there. I think it was Phil Mickelson has a house on the course because he loved it so much. He ended up buying it.
Yeah.
He's not on the PGA Tour anymore, but yes, when he was, he had a house there. So anyway, I feel like we've hit everybody in the slate. We've dug deep in this one. It's a really fun slate. Probably my favorite slate so far of the year, just because there's so many different ways to go with also, some obvious plays. So I think it's a week where, getting a little different, making some leverage plays really makes a lot of sense. You got to pick the right guys in the big games too. It's gonna be a fun watching week too. Like I'm definitely gonna have 2 TVs on Sunday afternoon because I'm putting Arizona Seattle on a TV too. I'm not missing that game just to only watch the Bills Chiefs.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be a fun week. Can't wait.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Whether it's on the audio version or you're listening to us live, we appreciate the question in the chat too. It's always fun to interact with people while we're kind of jumping around here. We want to thank No House Advantage for their sponsorship of the podcast. We really appreciate that too. If you can please rate and review us, that goes a long way to helping us too. If you want to follow us on Twitter, I am at Scott Jenstad. Ryan is at Ryan Belongia. Belongia is Belongia. We'll be talking some football on there. Baseball season's over, so you don't have to worry about me talking there. However, the Warriors season starts next Tuesday. So this might be a really good week if you want to talk football. There's no basketball. There's no baseball. This might be a big football week for me. So I joke. But other than that, it should be a really fun week. We appreciate everybody listening. We'll be back at you next Friday for week 7. So I hope it's a good one. Take care. We're back at you then.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.